Check TV. It's here.
Hi, I'm Judy Tyanji. Thank you for joining us. What you're about to see is a special presentation sponsored by the BCGEU. It does not necessarily reflect the views of the station. It's an important presentation, and it will be followed by half an hour of phone-in, where we'd like to hear from you on what you're about to see.
The following program is brought to you by the BC Government and Service Employees Union.
So kids are the ones that are most important, you know, and one should really think about the kids at all times in a relationship. Whatever you do affects the kids most.
In my books, children are all important. They are the future, our future. Whether we have them or whether we don't have them, children are the future of the planet. And we have to do and leave things for them.
What should we be doing with our children if we wish them to become good ancestors for future generations?
The values that we give them and bring them up with make them the kind of people that they're going to be as adults.
We seem to forget that we were once children ourselves.
Children are tomorrow's future. We have to prepare for them even before they come.
We like to think of ourselves as a caring society. Ask pretty well anyone, and they'll likely agree that providing a safe, nurturing environment for our children to grow up in is a priority. In 1989, Canada was a signatory to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. It outlines the inherent rights of children. Among its principles, the child shall enjoy special protection and opportunities to enable him to develop physically, mentally, morally, spiritually, and socially in a healthy and normal manner and in conditions of freedom and dignity. The best interests of the child shall be the paramount consideration. The child, for full and harmonious development, needs love and understanding and shall, wherever possible, grow up in the care and under the responsibility of his parents and in an atmosphere of affection and of moral and material security. The child shall, in all circumstances, be among the first to receive protection and relief. In British Columbia, we also believe in these rights, particularly for children who come under the care of government. But are the children receiving the support they need from government?
Definitely not. They are not well taken care of. They don't get enough attention. It's really down really down when it comes to taking care of kids these days. People don't care that much. The parents don't get the support. It's all because of broken family. That's it. That's the bottom line.
I certainly see what's going on around me, and I think that we could be doing more.
I don't think the state is equipped to try and cater to the kids of now. I think that we need to learn from the kids to find out what it is that the kids need in this day and age.
This perception is the result of publicity surrounding the tragic deaths or injuries of children who are under the care of government, beginning with Matthew Vaudreuil. In 1992, Matthew Vaudreuil was killed by his mother despite 60 warnings to social services that he was in danger. This year, a 9-year-old Abbotsford boy hanged himself weeks after the ministry received complaints about his home life but didn't intervene. The ministry did intervene in the case of baby Molly. She was placed with a foster parent who abused her, even though family members wanted to look after her.
We will be doing an internal review with our audit and review division, and there's an RCMP investigation going on.
Similarly, baby Jay suffered brain damage after being placed in what was supposed to be a protected environment. And there was more criticism over inadequate services for Mavis Flanders, a drug addict known to the ministry, whose 2-year-old son spent 6 days alone with her body.
Is the system working perfectly? Absolutely not. If this was a system that we could fix in 6 months, surely we wouldn't have had to create a new ministry. We would have tidied it up around the edges and said it's done. So to say that you could do this kind of organizational and cultural change in 6 months and have a system that works perfectly, of course, is not accurate. So is the system perfect? Of course not. Not nearly, but we're working on it.
In the past 10 months, 74 children in the care of or known to the ministry have died. It's clear that we have a problem, one that the governments have tried to remedy. In the late 80s, the federal government started with a series of reports on child abuse and family violence. In BC, the Ombudsman recommended integrated family services. The Making Changes series in 1992 recommended increasing resources for the poor and a better system for social workers. There were special reports on Aboriginal people. 1993 saw several more reports recommending better integration of government programs and services for children and families. But it was the death of Matthew Vaudreuil which rocked the social services ministry to its foundation. A raft of new reports followed. The most significant was by Judge Thomas Gove in 1995. He came up with a damning indictment of social services and made 118 recommendations for change. In all, a stack of studies outlining the serious flaws in the system. The government responded with new legislation and a sweeping overhaul.
Our action plan is a new integrated approach that puts kids and their safety first.
It created the new Ministry for Children and Families. It appointed a child advocate, a child and family commissioner, and a child and family review board. At the same time, responsibility for welfare payments was separated into a new human resources ministry under Dennis Streifel. The government had already introduced changes to welfare in 1994 with the BC benefits legislation, which changed age restrictions for single parents on welfare.
One of our most successful return rates to the workforce is among single parents. So it's not a situation at all where I would suggest that there's any abuse going on. What single parents have said to me is that we want to make sure that our kids are looked after first, and that's important to our government as well, but also that the jobs have to be available out there for single parents at a rate where they can afford to pay for childcare, etc. So that's what we're looking at as an overall package.
But is this flurry of well-intentioned activity producing the desired results? Those on the front lines delivering the services say no. They're dazed and confused, overwhelmed by the dizzying pace of change. Change that they say has not been well thought out, nor has it included their input. And worse, they say the government's commitment to children and families isn't matched by adequate funding. And they say rather than social services improving, it's actually on the verge of collapse with more kids at risk.
It's a profoundly demoralizing system. It's like Poland after the Soviet Union left. It's like the deconstruction of the welfare state, and we're experiencing it. It's profoundly demoralizing. Is all the change good? Change is constant. I appreciate that, but it's change that is being mediated by a lack of resources and a lack of funding and a lack of respect for the kind of work that we do, and no understanding whatsoever of the need for adequate, effective social services in a modern democratic society.
This program brought to you by the BC Government and Service Employees Union.
I see more the chaos occurring around who's taking over, what's happening, where is the funding coming from. The transitional budget has been used up.
There's people that are away, sick. I need to watch myself carefully. Sometimes I think I'm not doing a careful enough job so that I don't get burned out. I see a lot of people getting burned out. I talk to social workers. I ask them, how long have you been in this career? And they let me know, and it's not a long time, it's a couple of years. And I say, how much longer do you think you'll be in? And they say, I'm looking for a way out now. I can't handle it anymore. I'm burned out, I'm stressed, I'm getting sick. There's too much to do, and I can't do what I want to do.
It's terrible. The amount of people who are leaving is huge. They did have quite a big hiring a couple of years ago, but a lot of those people have actually left already, gone back east from where they came, or gone to other jobs in the community because of the workload. Why is it bad? For a lot of different reasons. We're not getting a lot of support, or at least we don't feel that we're getting a lot of support. the media, every time we open the newspaper, we're usually getting slammed to some degree. And then we don't feel that there's any support from upper management, from the ministry. Instead, we hear things like heads are going to roll when a situation has occurred. And those things just really bring morale down, and it gets people very, very angry. And they're sacrificing their lives, really, to do this work, and then getting no kind of compensation or support.
I think we need to be heard. I think workload is just an incredible issue. I think it is unrealistic to believe we can do this. I mean, information I've received at this point is that as the change occurs with the multi-teams and the investigation teams, that the multi-team anyway for Victoria, cases will go up to 58 to 60. That's an increase, and what I was hoping through this whole Gove inquiry and looking at the system was that we were going to be decreasing caseload and starting to really care about people that we work for and work with.
I tend to devote my time to the most serious, the most problematic cases, the ones that are obviously that way, and therefore I can't devote time to the run-of-the-mill cases, those who need my ongoing contact and work so I can bring children back to their families. I just can't get to that.
What are the dangers there if you deal with the most urgent cases first and put the other ones sort of on the back burner? Some would say, well, that's a fairly sensible way to go.
Well, under the circumstances, one could call it sensible, and you're right, it does cover off the most problematic situations, but what it does as well is it allows kids who are in care, it doesn't allow me to plan with kids who are in care any kind of appropriate return home, and that's the goal of our work. We aren't able to plan with the parents, plan with the children, we can't set up necessary parenting courses, we can't, for example, set up drug and alcohol counseling, there just isn't time. So the children sit, they're in limbo for a long time, or perhaps we'll return them sooner than we should. They may be at risk again. So yes, we're hitting the highlights, and yes, we're hitting perhaps the most important in terms of society's concerns about children. There's a lot of other work that needs to be done.
There's no doubt there's been a tremendous cut in the transfer payments from Ottawa, and there had to be some response to that. I cannot argue that point. I guess, like somebody said, politics is about choice. They had a choice, and they decided to make the choice that would be the hardest on clients and the hardest on workers. There are many, many other ways they could have cut back. They made the choice to cut back on the social safety net.
There's no summer replacement. So what happens is you go into a mode of just doing the intake. So you just do troubleshooting in the summer. So as soon as something happens, you go out and deal with it. It could be on somebody else's caseload. But there isn't somebody sitting in that chair doing that caseload. There just are not the resources available to do that. So social worker comes back from their vacation and they have a pile of stuff to do. And it may take them to Christmas to catch up, if ever.
People are fried. One of the serious problems that we have is that at the most senior levels in the ministry, including up to the deputy minister level, there's a view that social work is like an industry. It's like a mechanical kind of service, and that a piece of work comes in, and one worker works on it for a while and hands it off to a different worker who does something, and hands it off to a different worker who does something else. In fact, human services are just the opposite. Before effective work can be accomplished, there has to be a relationship established between the client and the social worker so that the work can proceed. What we found is that with frequent turnovers of social workers, frequent transients within the system, the clients are receiving a very disjointed service.
Well, I lived in care for about 2.5 years, and I believe I've had 5 different workers in that time, and lived in about 6 different placements. Youth are often bounced around from worker to worker and office to office, and they often have to re-explain their undesirable situations to many different people, strangers, and that can be pretty depressing. And naturally all these people are going to react very differently. I believe that ultimately what youth learn from that is that they're just a number in this huge system that they don't know, that they don't understand, and they don't know how to play the rules of the system in order to get their needs met. And because of the lack of relationship, there isn't always that safety, that feeling of safety to talk with their social worker about their needs and to get their questions answered. And ultimately they look to themselves or their friends for these answers, and that might not always be a healthy thing to do.
We have senior people in the ministry saying that the caseloads for social workers are between 25 and 27. Well, I've traveled around the province. Social workers have told me that their caseloads are 40, 50, more than that sometimes.
I don't even really want them to care that I'm overworked. It's not a personal thing for me. It's the community's children. If I can't get out there and protect the community's children, well, it's pretty sad if people don't care about that. I think we need to keep driving the issue until people realize it's the children next door, it's their own children. They need protection.
I don't think it ever looks at all the positive work we do and all the positive relationships that happen. There are cases that don't work well all the time. There are children that die in every area, in every part of the world, in medicine, in social work. Things happen. We cannot be vigilant 24 hours a day. And personally, I don't think we can take that responsibility as a ministry, that people in the community and people out there need to be aware as well.
There are all kinds of people out there who pass in society as people who have no problems at all, but who are really in need of social intervention, and they're not getting that at this time, and that puts you at risk, and that puts me at risk, puts our families at risk, and it jeopardizes the kind of society that we're living in.
Policies in the Ministry for Children and Families have become unbearable. When the new act was implemented, there were huge changes. The policy manuals weren't delivered to offices until at the earliest the week that the act was proclaimed, so social workers didn't even know what their rules were. Then when the policy manuals did come out, they were huge. They were huge documents. Here's only one example, and you'll see that this is labeled Volume 2 of the services.
That's pretty thick there.
Look at how thick that is, and you'll see that it's also very small type, so that it's even larger than it appears to be. When they sent out the policy manual, they discovered that they couldn't fit it all into one binder. And so this one is Volume 2A. It's a continuation of that same policy. And these are only two of the many policy manuals the social workers work with. They're responsible for this manual and for the adoption manual and for the contract management manual. They're responsible for the health services manual. They're responsible for knowing income assistance policy. And the list goes on. I couldn't even bring all the manuals today that they're responsible for.
Have you gone through your policy manual?
Not in a long time. We're also required, for example, to do a very comprehensive risk assessment of children. Excellent tool, but there simply isn't time to do it.
This program brought to you by the BC Government and Service Employees Union.
There's two serious problems that have come about with the establishment of the Ministry for Children and Families. The first problem is that their government has completely divorced issues of poverty from issues of children and families. And we know that poverty is a significant predictor of whether or not children will be at risk of abuse or neglect. The union recommended that when the Ministry for Children and Families was established, that there be at least one financial assistance worker on each one of those family support teams, so that those poverty issues could be attended to in a very well coordinated way. Government has made a different decision.
Our performance is rated on how many people we can deny, how many files we close. There was a time when I joined this ministry that you were rated by your relationships with clients, whether or not you respected their dignity, their right to self-determination, that sort of thing. Now the rating process seems to be on how many files you close. So these pressures, some places are a bit more subtle than others. These pressures are very real. And what that does, of course, to client service And what that does down the road to that relationship between client and worker is quite devastating. And we see it when we walk into the welfare offices with the wickets and the bars and the plexiglass. And it's just sort of counterproductive in the sense that it creates more problems than it solves.
The biggest changes are cuts to income assistance rates, which obviously pushes people further down the income scale into greater poverty. Elimination of earnings exemptions, which means that if people do have a job while on income assistance, they are able to get less benefit from their earnings, which pushes them down the income scale. Reclassification of people. Right now there's an issue about unemployable status. If the plan goes ahead as it was, it's going to cut $96 a month off checks for single persons. There's been quite a few changes, other legislative changes of that sort that whose end result is greater poverty.
Last fall, something like 14 offices were closed throughout the province, 3 in Vancouver alone, and the number of workers in each office was decreased. So our workload, our caseload, of course, rose quite drastically. So what we're finding now is that we have less time to deal with clients. We're finding that we're spending more time doing paperwork and monitoring and sort of administrative duties than actually seeing and attempting to assist people.
Well, I'm sort of surprised myself that it is that upsetting. Excuse me. What surprises me is that when you ask the question and as I put it together, it surprises me that I made the link just now in talking that my paperwork has become more of a priority to my clients. And I'm not going to take the responsibility on that I can't prioritize. That's not the situation in my office. The situation is that, like I say, there's too much to do and I can't do the work with the people that I want to do.
Our caseloads run from, in the Lower Mainland, the Fraser Valley, they're anything from 300 to 600. And that's cases, so that could mean even more people because there's families and what have you, couples. So if you work that over a year's time, as one of our ads in the newspaper said, that's less than an hour per client per year. And if in fact our role is to help people get off assistance, then it's surely counterproductive not to allow us the time to do our job.
I want a workload where I can actually have a connection with a person so that I can respect them and they can respect me. And then perhaps there'll be less violence in the workplace. I don't know.
One comment and frustration that some recipients expressed to me is that they have a very difficult time providing for their children's needs on the amount of income they receive. And some of them comment the fact that if their children are taken away from them and put in a foster home or some such situation, suddenly the money does become available for that child. And they express the frustration that if their child's taken away, then in that situation there's money for clothing and shoes and so on. They receive so little money for their family that they have a very difficult time meeting all of those same needs.
This program brought to you by the BC Government and Service Employees Union.
I would say there's a general feeling among social workers that that they're not really trusted with their decisions. So everything they do must be documented, and they're in quite a quandary, because if they do document everything, that means they have less time to actually do what they want to do and what should be done is social work. But if they don't do it, then they could be scapegoated or targeted for why wasn't it done.
In our collective agreement, social workers have the right to advise the employer that they can't obey the law because their workload is so high. I think that's a damning statement, that employees of government, the government that writes the laws, have to have a contractual right to tell their employer that they can't even obey the law. And around the province, hundreds of social workers and financial workers have been doing that.
I'm told in the case of Mavis Flanders that there was a report filed by social workers that they simply didn't have the time to give her case the attention it deserved. Is that correct?
The case of Mavis Flanders, the case in Nelson, other cases around the province, they're simply examples of serious problems that are in the system. And just like other social workers have been reporting that they can't obey the law and they can't adhere to policy, my understanding is that workers in that office have done exactly the same thing.
If you remove a child from a home, that is going to have an impact for the rest of that family's life, for the rest of that child's life. And if you remove a child and don't see that child for 3 weeks, that is really setting that child up for problems in the future.
What happens a lot of the times for kids in the Vancouver area is that they get placed out in the Fraser Valley. I had 16, 17 kids in care that I was legally responsible for. I was the legal guardian of. I'm supposed to see these children once a month. That's what policy tells me. These children are in Langley, Delta, Tawasin. It takes half a day just to see one child. So it's very difficult to see the children. What the argument is for social workers is that they're in care. I know they're safe. I have other children on my caseload that are still at home, and I don't know they're safe. I have to see them. They have priority over these children who are in foster care.
But this is very much a matter of public policy, of social policy. And that's why we're going to the public, to inform them about it. It's a serious problem for every person in this province. The children, because of government decisions, are being abused and neglected by their own government. And I use those words very deliberately. When adults fail to provide children with the things that they reasonably need for their safety and well-being, that's neglect. When adults deliberately withhold from children what it is that's predictable for those children's needs for safety and well-being, that's not neglect anymore, that's abuse.
Whether we spoke to the independent advocates for those needing social services or to the frontline social workers themselves, the overriding message was clear that chronic understaffing is reducing service to those people who need it most, and that as a society we face a choice: some short-term savings now versus some tremendous social costs later on. We asked Children and Families Minister Penny Priddy and Human Resources Minister Dennis Streufel to appear on this program. But despite our best efforts and the minister's apparent willingness to participate, their offices said they couldn't schedule the ministers in time for this program. So the final word to John Shields. He's been the president of the BCGEU for the past 12 years. Before that, he was a frontline social worker himself and an ordained priest.
I think what is lacking and has been lacking is a comprehensive picture of what the ministry is responsible to do. As this new ministry was created, Minister Priddy just simply did not have a thorough picture of the new responsibilities or the challenges that were given to her, the possibility given to her by the Gove report. And they need to have an opportunity to really take a look at what they are responsible to do, make sure they have enough staff to meet that responsibility, and then put together a plan which will really meet the needs of communities and the children and families in those communities. That takes time, and the legislation is only one piece, but they can't both cut corners around staffing and supporting children and at the same time reach the potential that's been given to them in this time period. From my point of view, the message of the right that government has to be smaller, that it can't really accomplish anything effective, has taken over to such an extent that we're feeling that unless we say it, unless we hold out the importance of public services, unless we advocate for the children and the clients, nobody else in the society is doing that. And I give a lot of credit to the workers in the field, the BCGEU members, who are saying public services are important. Without public services, we don't have a humane society. And we're saying it in a way that we're hoping the government listens. We're certainly trying to speak to the awareness of our neighbors and friends in our communities to reawaken the importance of government services.
Hi, I'm Judy Tyabji. Thank you for joining us tonight as we have a special edition of the Tyabji Show. Now, as you saw in the preceding half hour, there are some very important issues facing all of us, and now is your opportunity to talk about them. We have two guests joining us today. One is Nancy Parker, and she's with the Victoria Street Community Association. The other is Graham Carr. He's with the BCGEU. He's a social worker. He's also the chair of Local 601. Just before we talk to both of them, we're going to hear from Dr. Joseph Schaefer. He's a cultural anthropologist who has these observations of our human relationships.
Well, I have 3 children, and I remember what they, I think now, needed me to do such that they could feel cared for. And they were these same simple things that other people feel that they need in their lives to feel cared for. Children are not unique in that regard. We all need to be cared for. And the caring comes from fundamental human values. It does not come from skills that we learn in parent effectiveness training, from my point of view. Okay, so let me add to the fundamental values and say that's what I think I need to do to be a caring parent or a caring person in a community with children. One is I need to be interested in them and find them. First Nations people talk about finding the destiny in the child and providing a situation in which that destiny can be fulfilled. When a culture takes away the opportunity for a parent to find the destiny of the child, that to me is not a caring culture.
We're going to be talking in the next half hour to you. We want to hear what you think about what's going on in the system. We know every day there's a story in the news about something that's happened and how we're reacting to it. But first we want to talk to 2 people who on a day-to-day basis deal with these issues. First, Nancy Parker from the Victoria Street Community Association. Thank you for joining us. And also Graham Carr, you're with the BCGEU, you're a social worker, the chair of a local. I'm really glad you took the time to be with us.
Thank you so much.
And for the people who saw the first half hour, you were in that, and of course there were some people who do the work you do, Nancy. You are someone who works out in the field and you deal with people every day who are trying to deal with the system. What are your observations?
Every day people come into the office where I work and they come in fear. The BC Benefits has been changing over the past 3 years, and every time it changes people have less.
Right.
So
less money, you mean? Fewer
less
resources?
money, less support, less agencies that they can go to for help.
When you say they're in fear, why are they afraid?
They're in fear because the rules keep changing around whether they're eligible for income assistance or not. There is no guarantee of getting welfare anymore.
Okay. Now, Graham, you're dealing with people on the front line. What we saw in the first half hour is that the rules are a lot different in the last few years. What are you seeing?
What I'm seeing, Judy, is essentially chaos, and it's more chaotic now than it has been in the last little while. It's the summertime, a number of staff are off on holidays, there's no replacements, there's no backup, no support. Instead of devoting any adequate time to a client and their needs,
right.
It's a quick phone call, a quick decision, take a number next.
Now, do you deal with adults or children or both?
Both. I deal mainly in child protection. My job is to protect the children in the community, and I deal with their parents who may abuse them or may, through no fault of their own, not be able to support their children, maybe neglectful of their children.
Now, when you talk about protecting children, that's been one of the things that's been in the news for the last 4 years. Why don't you tell us what happens when a file hits your desk and you know there's a child who needs help?
What happens, in most cases, we receive a phone call from a neighbor, a teacher, a doctor, someone who has some information that suggests that the child's been neglected or abused,
right.
And we're mandated under the law to go and interview that child, interview the parent, interview any collaterals in the community, make a decision. Is that child safe? Can that child stay there? Generally, we've had time, we do a risk assessment, we make a decision, we move on. There isn't that time now. It's a quick, instant, can the child stay, can the child go?
And yet that's going to affect that child's life and that family's life.
The rest of their life.
Okay, we're going to go to the phones now. You should know that this is a special edition, which means we won't be taking commercial breaks, which I know is going to be good news for a lot of you who are with us every. Let's start by talking to Jason in Powell River. Hi, Jason.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead, please.
I just have I have a long-standing history with social services. In '78, I was placed into a foster home where I endured severe physical, psychological, and sexual abuse.
Right.
And following that, on the advice of a social worker, the same one who had put me into this foster home, I was, because there was no father figure, they figured that I should see like a big brother or something like that, and they hooked me up with a guy, and, I endured probably another 4 years of sexual abuse after that.
obviously you've had some pretty tough times.
Yeah, well, it even carries on into 1986, I believe. I was put into a group home in Fall River here, and you know, the amount of care that was there, that wasn't there, was just, you know, it was scary. Like these workers took it upon themselves. I remember one instance where they kicked me out of the group home for 10 days with no place to go, no food, no money. I ended up sleeping in a trailer.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, Jen. I'm going to let Graham talk to you about that, because you've raised something that obviously can only have gotten worse, is the resources for the workers. Jason's talking about, and I'm sure he could probably have taken up the whole half hour with that story, and it's horrifying. And yet you're saying that you're having fewer resources now.
Jason tells a very sad story, a story that historically has been around for a long, long time. I can say to you, Jason, things have improved in terms of the resources we have and in terms of the foster parents we have. And it's unlikely you'll see that kind of situation anymore. But having said that, there are so many children who come into care these days that we're just almost stacking them up in these resources.
How many children are in care right now?
I couldn't tell you.
I mean, I know
it's out of control. It's just beyond
thousands.
comprehension. And although there are good and competent and somewhat professional foster parents out there, they like us, don't have the time or the ability to deal with these kinds of things.
It's a sad story, though. I mean, that's his life that he's talking about. Let's go talk to now Lori in Nanaimo. Hi, Lori.
Hi.
Hi. Go ahead, please.
Well, I myself am trying to get off of social assistance.
Right.
And the last year I've had about 5 different workers. I'm a single parent.
Right.
And now I have a worker for financial aid, I have a worker for daycare, and I have an employment worker on 2 different ends of the city.
Wow.
They won't give me a bus pass to look for work. They won't give me a bus pass until I find work.
Right.
Which I won't need one then. And
So you're in a very small box, aren't you?
yeah, and then also for daycare, I get 3 mornings, 2-hour mornings, to try and find a job where I'm allowed to have preschool. I used to get 2 full months to try and find a job
Right.
before they canceled my preschool.
So obviously these changes are just making things harder on you.
Yeah, the only thing they ever did good was BC benefits, and it's ridiculous that I've had to have so many different workers. They don't even have a clue who I am, where I am, what I'm doing, if I'm hitting my kid or not.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there, Lord, because our lines are jammed. And I want to tell you, Nancy, in her story too, I'm sure for the workers it must be frustrating, because if she's getting shuffled around, they're having files shuffled on their desk. You deal with people like her every day.
Every day trying to find their way through the system. And that's some of the difficulty behind the BC benefits, is as things were divided into different categories of welfare and different systems that took care of you,
right?
It adds to the number of people you have to see in order to get that very first item you could have asked for in the first office.
Now that can't be meaning the system's simpler if she's going to 3 different people, Graham.
It's not simple.
That's
It's more
what you talk about
convoluted and
chaos.
complicated. Workers can't keep track. They don't know their clients anymore. It's a file, a piece of paper.
Okay, let's talk to Bonnie now in Vancouver. Hi, Bonnie.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead.
I think one of my concerns that I voiced before is that this is the first positive and informative thing I've seen the media actually approach.
Right.
And to actually have it come from BCGEU is the best thing I could possibly see on my TV.
Right.
Because we have consistently tried on a number of occasions to make the public aware of how overworked and how wrong it is to close offices.
Right.
And how wrong it is to understand that if you take something away, that's not going to make anybody's life better.
Yeah.
That's speaking about clients. That's speaking about their needs. That's speaking about the quality service that little quote gets thrown out quite a bit.
Right. And so basically, I guess you're happy that the BCG have taken the initiative, because we have to talk about this.
Most definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Graham, they're closing offices all over the province, and this is something that I found staggering at a time when people say we need better access. Transit fares are going up, the cost of living's going up, stress on families is at an all-time high, and it's harder for people to get access.
Judy, the conundrum that we face is it's a matter of public policy.
Yeah.
The government has to make a decision. What's most important? Are ferries more important than catamaran ferries, or are the people business more important?
But they say that they're putting people first. I mean, if you talk to the government, and Dennis Streifel is one of the ministers, he's a nice fellow, he means well, he really cares about people. And so, you know, with all of that, and then putting more money into it, it seems like it's still not working.
It isn't working. In all fairness, the government is trying hard. Mr. Streifel's trying hard, Mr. Preddy's trying hard, but we need resources. We need people to do the work.
Okay, let's talk to Vicki now in Coquitlam. Hi, Vicki.
Hi, I'm calling to ask a question.
Sure.
What it is that I've been through my own moments of the ministry and have my problems.
Right.
And I've gone through struggling for counseling and struggling get through, then the programs would help the people a lot more, and they wouldn't have half the problems that they do. And with the government cutting back to things that keeps being important, I think they're just going to find society's just going to get worse and worse, and we're going to be in big trouble.
Okay.
And more children are going to end up dying.
Okay, well, thank you for that observation. Do you think there's some security in the programs they're bringing out now? I guess that question for either of you, or both. Don't both fight to answer at
Certainly
once.
the potential for the duty, no question. And in terms of the Child, Family and Community Service Act and the policies that go with that, excellent legislation, no question about that. So there's potential, no question about that. But we need the tools to make it work, and we don't have those tools.
That goes back to resources. Do you see some security in programs there?
Well, if my understanding of what she said is that there is a lot of training programs out there. The bad side of that is training programs have now become a requirement of receiving your income assistance.
So, I see. So it's tied to something else.
So if your child is sick, if you can't make it that day, if you can't get your bus fare together or something, then you're again living in fear that you might lose your money because you can't make that commitment.
Okay, we're going to actually show you a comment that's from a Dr. Morelli. He is a practicing family physician, and he's had some interesting observations of what happens when people experience abuse.
A social worker cannot be with a high-risk family all the time. You have to trust the families, you have to trust the people in question. And there are times when somebody falls between the cracks. At my end, what I'd like to see is perhaps more social workers, more training. I would like to see those families that are at high risk, young expectant mothers, or mothers who have a previous history of drug and alcohol, such type of high-risk people, better monitored so that we can prevent things from going wrong.
There seems to be consensus that we need to do something. We're talking about the social services system. We're joined by Nancy Parker and Graham Carr, and we're going back to the phone lines, and we're going to talk now to Pam in Victoria. Hi, Pam.
Hi, Judy.
Hi, go ahead.
My comment is that I think the government has to look at the employees. We've seen the pain in the last half hour with the last social worker and the tears. As a recent delegate at the BCGEU convention, I saw the pain of many social workers, and I think the government's got to address the pain that the social workers are feeling, the field assistant workers are feeling.
Are you a social worker too?
No, I'm not.
Okay,
No,
because I guess you can see that there's a lot of people who want to do things and they can't.
Yeah, it's I think they've just got to look at their employees.
Right. Okay.
Thank
well,
you.
Thanks for that comment. Well, that's one that I'm sure you'll be agreeing with.
I certainly appreciate that comment. But at the same time, people need to know that the pain that we feel is the pain for our clients. We're stressed, we're overworked, but we can get through that. It's our clients who have the difficulty, so the pain focus is on them.
It must also be days when you get so frustrated because you're in a box that it's only human that some of that gets across the desk at the clients.
Absolutely.
It's going to happen. Okay, let's talk to Paul now in Comox. Hello, Paul.
Good evening.
Hi, go ahead.
What I'm calling to do is merely make a comment more than anything else, and that is the social services ministry, and perhaps the public at large, should understand that what is done or is not done for children right now is something that's going to have a profound effect on society forever.
Right. So basically, this is what we're looking at is investing or not investing in
Well,
our own
that's right.
future.
If you're going to provide children an opportunity to build on character and therefore build a future, that's something constructive. And that's a choice that can be made right now.
Right. Okay.
But also the choice can be made not to do that.
Right. Well, thank you very much for that. Nancy, you deal with people every day, including people who have children. You must see how much they'd like to be able to provide that kind of environment for their children. Any comments on what he's saying? I mean, it's sort of one of those things. Of course, everybody's going to agree. You know, you want to invest in the kids.
That's right, and I think some of what we're seeing with the changes is children now under 19 can't get onto the welfare system, and we're seeing like a lot of youth on our streets that are being told, well, the message to them is that they're worthless.
Yeah, I do see that, and a lot of people, of course, are angry because they think that the youth maybe do more to help themselves, but at the same time, they don't qualify for services. Yeah, so they're sort of shut out of the whole system. Okay, let's talk to Don now in New Westminster. Hi, Don.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi, fine, thanks. Go ahead.
Good. A quick question for the gentleman there. I'm kind of concerned about his, or not necessarily his, but the lack of support given by our fellow component members, BCGEU, concerning our status with our jobs within the Sheriff's Department. And
are you talking about the people who work with young offenders?
not so much them. It's just we are of the same component, and they don't seem to support us as much as we're obliged to support them.
Do you understand what he's talking about?
I do.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll let him answer
An
that.
interesting comment, Don, and in all fairness, I must say that we do support you. We support you very strongly, and we have done a number of things that have been of assistance to you in terms of your job classification, among other things.
Okay, so this is obviously something a little bit internal, so we'll let you guys fight that one out. Let's talk to Jean now in Maple Ridge. Hi, Jean.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead, please.
I had a question. There was a social worker shown from Vancouver who said that once the child's placed into foster home, then they're safe, and I go into the next one because there's other children in the home that may not be safe.
Right.
But a lot of abuse is happening in these foster homes. And what screening is being done with regards to the foster parents? And if there's not time to do a proper risk assessment, you could potentially take a child, ruin their family life from an unabusive home, place them into an abusive home, and the ministry's got to be accountable for that.
Right. Well, and she's raised some excellent points, and what I'd like to add to what she said is that we did see people suing the ministry successfully. There's been some talk that if the government doesn't give you the resources needed on the front line, there could be a class action suit from people who were in care against the government. To what extent? What are your comments to
Well,
that?
some complications around that, Judy. The lawsuit, I think, goes back to 1974, so some history there.
Right.
Foster homes in this day and age are fairly well assessed, complete home studies done, 4 or 5 visits, reference checks, criminal checks, and so on.
You do everything you can.
Absolutely, but like anything else in this world, things do go wrong. People get stressed out, foster parents get stressed out, and unfortunate incidents happen.
Right. Okay. So obviously this is something where you say, well, you know, we do the best we can.
Do the
But
best we can with what we have.
yeah, I guess there's so much we could have a much longer debate on. Let's take another call. We'll talk quickly to Tom in Vancouver. Hi, Tom.
Hi, I just wanted to say I'm a disability rights advocate for the Coalition of People with Disabilities. And yesterday, in regards to making a comment on how overworked the workers are, yesterday I was trying to get a hold of a worker for my client outside of the Vancouver area. He needed some financial assistance and some money to buy some catheters. He's been using his catheters for so long that he had a bladder infection. He was getting quite sick from that, and the lines were busy all day. And today I found out it was only because there was only 2 people in this office to look after the whole the caseload of the whole office yesterday. So we finally did get him the assistance he needed, but no one should have to go through that kind of suffering.
Okay, well, thank you for that. That's about as close as you can get to a direct example, and that's what you're talking about.
Much more clear than that.
Needs more people to answer the phone. We're going to show you a comment from 2 people who work with Aboriginal people in the system. Now, a lot of people don't realize that if you're Aboriginal, you fall into a whole different category, and the federal government gets involved, and there are different programs involved, and so there actually are unique circumstances surrounding the Aboriginal people. And let's see what 2 people have to say about this.
And especially in the case of Aboriginal children, we can make a very good argument that they should have been left in their own homes or in their communities to be looked after. They would have received much better care in the sense that culturally sensitive, loving, and close-knit, extended family units, which is something that the non-Native society doesn't have, and so don't give particular faith to. What I'm saying here is that an Aboriginal kid raised by an auntie or a grandmother or even a cousin is doing fine, whereas a non-Aboriginal kid may not be. It truly may be that they're being abandoned by their parents. They aren't abandoned in the Native community. So to use the type of criteria that is being used to determine whether or not those kids are okay and then put them into receiving homes where there's 8 or 10 other non-Native kids, or even if there's 8 or 10 Native kids but from different nations, I don't think it's better care at all.
Well, they're probably not aware of the extended family system that works on this, or, I can think of a number of families that have grandparents looking after your grandchildren and uncles and aunts, bringing up children. So, that does happen. But unfortunately, families do get into difficulties where the families need counseling or, more counseling than, families can provide.
Well, there are solutions out there. We're going to talk to more of you to find out what you think of the system. And Dr. Sharon now in Langley. Hi, Sharon.
Hi there.
Hi, go ahead.
I'm just calling to lend my support to the frontline social workers. I believe they're being scapegoated in a lot of ways by the media and society. I think we're losing good social workers, and people are probably quitting out there. I think we need to support them a little bit more to attract them to do the jobs that we need them so desperately for. And my sympathy goes out to a lot of the frontline social workers.
Okay, well, thank you for that comment. Graham, burnout.
Appreciate that comment. It's ironic you make that comment. Two of my colleagues went off on stress leave today.
Oh, jeez. Now, when they go off on stress leave like that, do they get replaced? Are there people being... No. So what? What happens? You've got this office that's already overstressed and two people are gone?
Without being too dramatic, Judy, as it stands now...
Be dramatic. You're allowed to be dramatic.
I'm covering 4 caseloads, 98 files I'm covering today.
And normally, when you went into social work, you expected to cover...
15, 20.
15 or 20, 98 files. And that's why the phone keeps ringing when somebody needs new counselors. And of course, when he gets the infection, it costs the medical system, and it goes on and on. Yeah. Let's talk to Anne now in Victoria. Hi, Anne.
Hi, I'm a financial assistance worker.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to say that I had a social worker say to me one time, how can I apprehend this woman's child when she cannot afford to feed her? And I really think they need to have a look at the rates. They're a little bit archaic, and poverty and child protection go hand in hand. I would like it if we could work more closely with the social workers instead of separating.
Okay. Thank you for that comment. Now, she's talking about something in the system that both of you deal with where a parent gets more resources if their child, or basically there are more resources for the child if the child is removed from the family. And both of you must have to deal with that every day.
The whole system is set up to help you once you're drowning. It doesn't step in and help you when you have the need, when you still have the energy to get out of that poverty. It waits until you're in crisis.
And that is totally unnecessary, I think. Well, because it's a matter of priorities, as you were saying. Let's talk to Faye now in Duncan. Hi, Faye.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead.
What my question is, right, is I don't have any complaint about the social services themselves. Like, I think they're doing a great job and everything, right?
There you go.
And, I mean, I feel obliged that I'm on it, that they're willing to help me. My complaint is the social worker I have, how do I put this? I do exactly what I'm supposed to do with my money, right? But every once in a while, my child gets ill or something like that, and I need extra finances. When I go in there, right, I get this cold shoulder. Well, what did you do with your money?
Right.
Exactly what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
How do I get past here without getting kicked off?
Okay, well, that's a very important question. Okay, who wants to volunteer to take that one on? I mean, she's talking, I mean, how much do you get on social services? If someone gets sick and medicine is expensive, that could eat up your hydro bill.
Very readily. But it's like anything else. If there's an issue with the worker, be it a financial assistant worker or a social worker, if you have a personality conflict, kick it upstairs. Ask to speak to the supervisor. There are appeal mechanisms. Take advantage of them, please.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, Nancy, about people living in fear, and I guess that's part of what you're...
And also, if you have a problem with your welfare worker, you can always take someone with you into your appointment that can be there for your support and as your witness to your treatment.
Okay, let's talk to Jane now in Mission. Hi, Jane.
Yes, hello.
Go ahead.
Yes, hi. I just would like to know if parents are supposed to be accountable and responsible for their children. And if those children are put in the care of social services, why is it that the social worker is not always held accountable and responsible in regards to being able to alter reports?
Okay, so now you're talking about within the system, once the social worker is responsible, how does that work? Okay, well, she's raised an interesting question because the legalities around a child who's been apprehended are very complicated.
It's a fair comment, though. As a social worker, if I remove a child and that's okayed by the court, I become that child's guardian. I become responsible for that child. Generally speaking, that's not an issue for me. I accept that responsibility. However, at this point, it's extremely difficult to be the guardian of an extraordinarily large number of children.
If 98 files, then it's pretty tough because if half of them are children, that would be very complicated. Okay, but it's an excellent point. Let's talk to Angela now in New Westminster. Hi, Angela.
Hi, I just wanted to ask questions about the maintenance program. Why are we forced to join this program to get money from the fathers or whatever?
Okay.
And then they threaten to cut me off if I don't sign the papers and everything.
Okay, that's a good question, and that also raises the issue of the clawback that occurs. The government doesn't call it clawback, but the Family Maintenance Enforcement Program. What are your comments on that?
I hate it. Welfare asks you to exhaust all sources of income. So if that means going after child support, that's what you have to do in order to get your welfare check. What it doesn't take into account is that it might ruin the relationship between the two separated parents and ultimately affect the children.
It's often a lot more complicated than we like. We like to see it in black and white and have it easy in terms of human relationships, but they're never easy, are they? And now you get your whole system. We're actually out of time for this portion of things, but Graham Carr, Nancy Parker, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And I'm sure that we will be talking more about this. We're going to give the last word in this section to a young woman who spent a lot of time in care. Her name is April Barlow. She's with the Victoria Youth in Care Network, and she has these observations of what's happening.
The emergency shelter that I stayed at, their mandate, I guess, was to only let me stay for 3 days, and I stayed there a couple times. And the group home was the longest place I ever stayed, and that was for 2 years. I'm seeing a lot of changes. I'm seeing some good things happening in terms of the system. I see it being very slow, however, and I've seen, exactly what I experienced, and that is many youth who have many questions and don't really know what's happening, what these changes are. And, the new legislation was introduced quite a while ago, and not all of it has been proclaimed, I think is the word for it. And so policymakers are still working on what that's going to look like and how those sections, I'm particularly thinking of the youth agreement section, is going to be implemented and what that's going to mean in terms of practice and the effects on youth.
I want to thank all of you who helped to participate tonight to bring this important issue up for debate, and especially to the BCGEU for taking the time to make this debate possible. But it's so easy to get caught up in the black and white comments around people who need assistance. And unfortunately, when we only have 30 seconds to deal with the whole issue, sometimes the important things get edited out. So tonight we've had a chance to look at a system that needs some change. And what we have to do is put the priorities on the front line so that clients get the kind of service they need, so we make the proper investments for the future. It's up to all of us to speak out on this issue, call our elected representatives, and talk to our neighbors about it. I'm Judy Tyabji, and that's my opinion. What's yours?